Do you have a medal with you?
I do, yes.
Can we see it?
So,
Can we see it?
It doesn't come in a Crown Royal bag, but
that would be amazing.
so this is a medal from Salt Lake. So yeah, I'm going to put it up close to the screen so you can see it.
Hello and welcome to the 2020 podcast, bringing clarity to business, entrepreneurship, and life. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you again for joining me here to learn and to grow. This is a very special episode. It is the 1-year anniversary of the 2020 podcast. On October 15th, when this episode is going live, is 1 year from the first episode, which we launched in 2019 with Mr. Todd Talbot. Very, very special day for me. And to celebrate this special occasion, I have to say, I apologize to all my other guests. My favorite guest so far in this 1 year of this podcast, Sami Jo Small. Sami is a 3-time Olympian, 3-time medalist in the Olympics, 5-time world champion, and 2-time MVP of the World Championship. I should tell you what she does. She's a goaltender, former goaltender for Team Canada. And I'm so grateful to have you here, Sami. Thank you for joining me here on the podcast today.
Well, thanks, Harbir. I'm excited that it's your anniversary. Happy anniversary. And maybe I'm going to be the worst guest. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think so.
That's very generous of you to say in the intro, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I hope my other guests aren't listening because they might get up. Because I love my other guests, every single one of you. But I am a hockey fanatic, and so to have somebody who played at the absolute kind of pinnacle of the elite level of the sport is absolutely incredible for me to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy. Now, all those things I listed, playing at this elite level, winning 2 gold medals, 1 silver medal in the Olympics, and 5 world championships, 2 MVPs in the world championship. Like, this is incredible stuff. But the thing I want to start with is that you come from an incredible lineage of optometrists in the family. So if I get this right, your grandfather, your father, your brother, and his wife are all optometrists. Yeah. How incredible. Now, I want to give, because of course, a majority of my audience is eye care providers and optometry people. So I want to just talk a little bit about that. And I want to give a shout out first to Luke Small, your brother, who I met just earlier this year. And the guy is like, his enthusiasm is just contagious. I know, and I from reading your book, like, you speak about him with such reverence and so much about what you've achieved and done in your life. You give him so much credit. And I found myself having so much more respect for Luke while reading the book. But I thought then it's only right to give him a shout out. I'll only give him a shout out. And I wanted to show you this little sticker of the Armstrong and Small. He was handing these out at the conference here in Vancouver earlier this year. And the little button here. So I still have these.
That's actually a picture of my dad.
I know. He was telling me. I was like, how amazing. And actually, the first question I want to ask you, Sami, is, so the way you talk about your family, and this is the same way Luke was talking about you and his dad and your dad back in February this year. When I see that sort of consistency of certain types of behaviors from one sibling to another, I say, okay, well, it has to come from the parents somehow. I'm curious what you've learned from your parents, and now you're a mother and you have a young daughter, and I wonder what lessons you've learned from your parents that you'd be transferring down to your daughter.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions there. I'll unpack some. First of all, growing up in an optometry family, I was a special privilege, but it also meant that I learned way more about eye care and eyes than I think the average person. So people will often come to me with their eye problems. And my husband and I always joke that whenever we get together with a family, it's always like, oh, what's their still? What's their still? And, we still have no idea what that means.
That's awesome.
Asking it all the time, oh yeah, they're talking about this eye disease or that eye disease and showing pictures. And of course they're all in the profession, so it's all exciting for them. But 2 of us are kind of on the outside, like, you're just making jokes the whole time. But I do know a lot more about eyes than I think the average person. Right, so, But yes, growing up in that family where my grandfather passed the business down to my dad and then down to my brother and his wife. And It is obviously a very generational thing, but something that I'm super proud to be a part of. While I never worked there, it still is a pride within the family that they've been able to have this incredible lineage, because as everybody knows, it's not, easy in today's day and age to consistently sort of pass through the bloodlines that way. So I'm proud of them for having done that. But, I think what led both my dad and my brother, not as much my grandfather. I think my grandfather went into optometry for different reasons, but my dad and my brother are obviously very outgoing people, and they love to talk. I love to talk, and I always joke with my friends, like, I'm actually the quiet one in my family compared to them. So my dad, I think, really used it as an opportunity to just chat with people. I think that that's what he loved most about the job was he really saw these people as his, not just as patients, but as friends. And I think that that's the same way my brother sees it is I think that within the office, they're often trying to hurry him up through appointments because he's always just talking and talking and talking. And then, you see somebody that you haven't seen in years and you just want to get caught up. And then people are asking about me. And so then, of course, he wants to talk hockey. And
of course,
I think that's the hardest thing. And his wife, Gina, who is also in the office too, I think is constantly trying to be like, okay, like just like hurry it up. Like, let's leave the office at some point. But I think that that's what makes them so great at what they do is their ability to connect with people. And so you say, what did I learn from my family and specifically from my parents is I think I learned that inquisitiveness from my dad, that wanting to know about other people. That's a unique attribute, but also a unique skill, that to make others feel valued. He always tried to do that within the practice. And I actually hated going to the optometrist when I was a kid. I hated it so much because I had such terrible eyes.
Oh.
And I'm
what was
actually
your still?
I don't even know. I'm like a -9. I'm like
okay.
So what's my still? I don't know. I am terrible eyesight is and even now I struggle to get close to 20/20 vision. And I think I was one of their worst cases growing up. My dad gave me my first pair of glasses when I was, I don't know, maybe 4 years old, and I stuffed them behind my bed and crushed them because I didn't want to wear them. But it was just so innate in our family. I didn't really understand what a privilege it was to have professionals taking care of your eyes. I always had access to the newest and the latest and the greatest. And I became a contact lens wearer at a very young age, and luckily have been a very good contact lens wearer. So haven't been susceptible to dry eyes or anything that, I feel like they're all talking about all the time. They're gonna so critique me on my language right now.
Well, I should have prepped you a little bit before the podcast.
That's okay. I feel like every dinner is coming back to me right now. Like all these words.
Meibomian gland dysfunction and dry eye disease.
My eyes. Yeah. Conjunctivitis. Is that
conjunctivitis? That's right. You got that right. That's good. That's very good. So that's awesome. Thank you for remembering to answer that question after I gave you this barrage of information before the actual question itself. And
so I don't want to leave my mom out of that as well.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah, she obviously was not an optometrist, but she took care of the books for the office, and so was involved in essentially being an entrepreneur. And so I learned a lot of that from her. She volunteered for every sports organization that Luke and I were a part of. Wow. So we sold the bathing suits for the swim club, or she was a timekeeper at a swim meet, or was doing this and that, a treasurer for a hockey team. Whatever it was, there was always this element of service, that you belong to something that you need to also give back. You can't just take from the organization. And so I think I learned that from her. The ability to smile through adverse situations, I think she has down to a T. I can remember Luke and I getting yelled at the top of our lungs, and she picks up the phone in just a nice, pleasant way. So I certainly have learned that. And I think that served me well later to, just take a deep breath before perhaps saying what you might regret later. And, keeping things in-house and trying to rectify the situation within, whether the family structure, the business, whatever, and then having outwardly a unified front. And so that's something that I think, between the two of them, they're very different personalities, but I definitely learned a lot from both of them. And the fact that we were, as optometrists, you are entrepreneurs, and learning that side of the business at an early age helped me in my career, becoming essentially a one-woman show as a professional speaker, and now as an author, that you got to work hard if you're going to make something succeed.
Yeah, wow, absolutely. Lots of amazing lessons, and a lot of that comes through in the book, which I listed all these amazing accomplishments, and I forgot out author of a brand new book. I mean, you see it behind Sami there. But right. For people who are not watching the video, on the audio here, Sami just released a brand new book. It's called The Role I Played, Canada's Greatest Olympic Hockey Team. If you can't see it, please look it up. It's got this beautiful red cover and a picture of Sami in her Team Canada hockey gear. And it's really a great book. And I was just saying to you before we were online here on air, like I was going through this roller coaster of emotions with you, and I wanted to, like, at points reach through and like strangle somebody for saying what they said to you, and then I wanted to like give you a hug, but now I know you don't like hugs, so so I'll just pat you on the back or something. But like really a great book for a lot of different types of people. But I wanted to jump into something that might be I guess a bit of a heavy topic, but I really want to just tackle it early on here, and then get your thoughts. And that is on like gender bias and equality. You played your entire life until you got into like adulthood. You played against boys. You're the only girl on the team. You're the only girl around that you knew of who played hockey. And I'd like to know. I'll ask this as a kind of an open question, but did you encounter a lot of gender bias and inequality along your way? And if so, like, what's the first thing you can remember, and what's kind of the most impactful thing that maybe you experienced along the way?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And you're certainly right that is the truth for my entire career. But I guess as a young girl, I love this game, and my brother played this game, so I wanted to play this game. And him allowing me to play with him and his buddies playing street hockey, to me, normalized it. If my brother thought that I could play, then I could play. There wasn't, the guys I was playing street hockey with, they became my friends. When I asked to register for hockey, my parents didn't balk at it. They themselves didn't grow up as hockey people. So when they went to register me as a hockey player, that's where they started to hear a lot of negative comments. And there was obviously a lot of chauvinistic attitudes at the time. In fact, in the 60s and 70s, there was more women's hockey, and then it became non-existent. It was at the time when women, our bodies were misconstrued to indicate that we could not play sports, you couldn't run marathons, you couldn't do all these things, or you would not have children later. And they told that to my dad when he went to register me. And I was just very fortunate that he happened to have a sister that played sports when she was growing up. And now this is a long time ago when that was also not really what most girls did, but he had an older sister that he revered, and because of that could see the athleticism in her, and I think never questioned if I wanted to play hockey or dance or whatever it was. So both my parents, I think, were the heroes in the story because they dealt with all of that. And I never saw myself as different. I loved hockey like the boy beside me. I think often, when we are different as children, it just, that is normal. I just finished reading P.K. Subban's father's book and about their family. And they grew up in, I think it was Sudbury or Thunder Bay. Obviously very different than their cohorts, but hockey united them. And I always felt like that for me growing up. I was very fortunate to have some incredible male teammates who treated me like a sister. And that's not to say they didn't tease me and they didn't include me in all of the jokes. But it was no different than what my brother was saying to me. You know what it was? I never felt like an outcast because I was a girl. But I certainly, as I got older, started to realize that what I was doing was not normal, that this was different, and that I was carrying a lot of expectation with that. So I also think that when you're different, it can either push you one way or the other. You can have a just terrible experience, and it pushes you out of that sport or out of that activity, or you feel like you are representing that entire gender, race, ethnicity, religion, whatever. You feel like you are attempting to prove it to all these other people. And so I always felt that way. I took it on as a challenge. Like, I'm going to show these guys that girls can play hockey. And I think it made me work harder. It made me perhaps hide any setbacks or any challenges. And it was the only life I knew. So it wasn't like I was comparing it to anybody else. That's what I went through to play. And, I think a lot of people are overcoming challenges that we don't know about. Mine just happened to be overt. And, I was that girl that played hockey. But I think that skill to be challenged and want to overcome certainly helped my career and helped my ability to climb the ladder and succeed in the sport of hockey. But it's interesting because when I joined the national team, that became a very hard mindset to change, because then suddenly I wasn't different and I wasn't the only girl, and so to find yourself then amongst your own is sometimes even more difficult. And a lot of women that come from men's hockey say that they felt like they had all this pressure on their shoulders that they had, put there in a good way to perform. And now all of a sudden there wasn't that. So what is your motivating factor, and trying to find that. So I feel like I've experienced both sides of it. And you ask if there was any terrible things. There certainly was a lot of terrible things. One I talk about in the book, where my brother wasn't at Berkeley yet. That's where he went to optometry school, but he had come over from Texas and was watching one of my Stanford games, and we were playing against Berkeley, and the Berkeley fans were just atrocious, yelling this, that, and the other at me about my father, about my mother, about whatever. And it was, I think, the first time that my brother wanted to jump over the partitions and strangle somebody else because they're saying this about his sister.
Yeah, right.
And he can't do anything about it. But for me, it was just a daily part of hockey. Every arena I went into, I was the only girl. And so that was the chant. And you always want to get under the goalie's skin. I mean, any NHL rink you go to, you can hear it. So, of course, they're going to use whatever they can. And at the time, societal norms didn't preclude that, and so they used it. And I certainly had everything possible yelled at me. But I never really took it I never took it in a bad way. And I don't know if that's just my upbringing. My father, I say at the very end, is sort of a pathological optimist. And so that's kind of how I perceive life, I think. And I tend to look at the best. And my husband is definitely gets irked at me sometimes to be like, no, this is terrible. And I try to see it from that person's point of view. Like maybe they don't know better, or maybe they haven't been educated, or maybe they've never seen a woman play. So this is the first time. So I'm going to try to prove it to them.
Yeah.
But what's really special is a lot of the guys that I grew up playing with, they were my biggest supporters. They were the guys that defended me to the other team or to other parents. And those guys now are coaching their young daughters' teams. And those guys are allowing their daughters to pursue sports. And so I think that I thought I was evoking change in the parents of the people watching me play, but really what I was doing was evoking change in my peers, and that an entire generation of men that played with me or against me too saw that a female could play hockey. And I think that that's really important when it comes to any differences, is that we educate ourselves about not only what those differences are, but see the value. And I think that that's what is so important in allowing somebody to play. Had my brother never allowed me to play, despite the fact that I was 3 years younger than him and his peers, I would have never had those opportunities. And so I try to encourage others to look on the sidelines to see who is not participating, who is not involved in, whether it's a discussion in the workplace environment or It's in your family structure. Who is not having a voice, and what is that voice? And if you don't curate and help that person along, they will never have the experience. So I think mentorship is really key. And that's what I think was so special about my brother, is that that's not to say he wasn't terrible to his little sister, but that outwardly he fought for me. And I'm sure that he had to deal with a lot more than I ever did, as people, told him that a sister made a higher hockey team than he did or whatever, but he just always was, seemed to be super proud. That doesn't mean he didn't stick me in laundry baskets.
Good. I'm glad he did that too. Good. Yeah. That's part of being a sibling. You have to, older sibling. I know my little sister has had to endure a lot of, she still does. I mean, that's the standard greeting is like a shot in the arm, right? That's like, hey, how's it going? But you know what? I want to say thank you for doing all of that and enduring all of that. Now I have two little girls. One of them's 3.5 and the other one's just a year old. So it's amazing now that because of people like yourself who are willing to endure and kind of break those societal norms and push for all this change. And I know you speak about the ladies who came before you, who really pushed for those types of changes. And someone like Manon Rhéaume, who played in the NHL, it really changed things a lot for women's hockey. And then you're continuing to push and creating the Canadian Women's Hockey League and things like that. Really incredible. So from my perspective, thank you very much, because I know you've created a lot more opportunities for my daughters and other people's daughters as well.
I just feel so fortunate that I often get asked if I feel like a pioneer, and I don't, because I feel like I got to play. I got to be the one that got to enjoy and reap the rewards for those women that came before me. That maybe, I talk about somebody like Susie Ewan in the book, who from a Chinese immigrant family didn't start playing until she was 18 years of age, because suddenly there was a club team at her university, but there's no girls teams for her to play. So these women that, while they did get to experience a little bit of hockey, often were forced out or didn't have the experiences that I got to have. So I feel very fortunate, and that's nice of you to say about your young daughters, but I never really felt like I was the one that had to endure just the awful stories that I hear. I feel fortunate that not only was I in a family that allowed me to play, but I was able to surround myself with teammates that saw me for my hockey abilities. And I think I am a product of all of those people, and it takes a community, and it takes that belief that people are capable of whatever they want to do, and finding that passion is so key.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about, majority of your adult life here, playing hockey and your achievements in your book. But prior to that, it's not like you just showed up and you were a hockey player. You've been a high-level athlete your whole life, playing in high school, various sports. But you had a full ride scholarship to a Division I NCAA school for track and field. You went to Stanford. And that in itself is mind-blowing to me. Again, as a big sports fan, is that's incredible. What I wanted to actually ask you here is, clearly you've been very, very athletic throughout your whole life. And a question that I hear, or a topic that I hear kind of discussed between sort of successful people in different realms, is the idea of talent versus skill. And talent being that you're born with it, it's innate to you, and skill being that you've had to practice it. And I wonder where on that spectrum you think you fall.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say that we certainly were born with family genes that allowed us to be athletic. I think I have a cousin that just narrowly missed out on the Olympic team in 1980 because Canada boycotted the Olympics. He was a swimmer. His son swam at the Olympics in 2004, I believe, or 2008. And so clearly we have some sports genes. My dad played high school basketball and, played the high school sports. My mom, I don't know. She water skied and she swam when she was a kid, but it wasn't something that girls were kind of allowed to continue to do. But certainly there's a reason that we were, able to succeed in the athletic world, is I'm sure that we have some genes that allowed us for that. But on top of that, I think that we were exposed very early to sports and to various different activities that allowed us to have some body awareness. And I think that then when we joined athletic teams, it meant that we were, in the middle of the pack or in the higher echelon of the team. And that probably brought joy with it too. You feel confident about something that you're doing well, so then you do more of it. And being a swimmer at such a young age, so my brother and I started swimming when we were 5. And I think that swimming, skating, gymnastics, those kind of sports are just so key for young kids, because it gives them just a baseline to be able to then pursue whatever it is that they want to do. On top of that, my parents exposed us to so many different sports. I often joke that my mom was a taxi service, because she just, from one to the next to the next. And we often had 3 or 4 different activities in a night after school. And how they did that, we loved it. It was amazing. But how they did that is really testament to them. And they were always there. It wasn't like they were shopping out our taxi services to somebody else, or they were always there cheering. Every practice, every game. At times as a kid, it was annoying because your parents are in the stands. But I've now come to really appreciate that is a huge part of our success, is they were they'd never cared how we did, but they did care if we tried. And so I always wanted to do well, obviously for myself, but for them and for the amount of time and effort they put into it. And I think track and field really helps with the repetition of skill and activity and teaches the value in that. And so getting involved in track and field helped me to learn the importance of practice and how that directly relates. Obviously, in track, you're doing it over and over and over and over again, which I think then directly related to the other sports I was playing. I wanted to really learn the skill, and I spent just hours and hours and hours on our front driveway learning skills. And that could have been, learning to swing the tennis racket, because I had just watched the US Open on TV, and I'd go outside and I would tell myself I had to do 100 perfect ones on that X, and I'd put a little X on the garage door. And so, I don't know, maybe I had this sort of data engineering brain back then that allowed me to do that. I'm sure the rest of my friends thought I was a little bit crazy.
Yeah, there's a concept of that deliberate practice, right? So for somebody to get better at something, they have to not just play a sport, they have to deliberately practice very specific skills, like hitting a tennis ball on an X 100 times in a row.
Right, and it's not like I ever played tennis. Right. It's not like, but I loved that part of getting better at something. And I think a lot of it too was I was always competing with my brother. So we would play basketball on our front driveway, and he would beat me. So then I would get mad, and then I would stay out and take another 100 layups to make sure that next time I could be a little bit better, a little bit closer.
That's amazing.
And I was very naturally competitive. So I think having somebody that I could compete with all the time allowed me to sort of flourish and not see age or gender as the reason that I was losing. I mean, here I am, a little girl 3 years younger than him, and I'm getting mad that I'm like losing anything. That's crazy. He had probably 2 feet on me at the time. So.
Well, clearly, okay, so like you said, yes, maybe there's a genetic component, but clearly you are wired to want to do those monotonous things that a lot of people get bored of, right?
It's funny because I took my husband, who's a Paralympian, vying for his 6th Paralympic Games in the sport of sledge hockey. I took him throwing, and I thought he has this huge upper body. He'd be so good at the discus and javelin. So I took him out back, and we were practicing it, and he is very good at it. But, he sits in a chair, so he's, throwing it out there. And he basically says to me at the end of practice, so you throw it, you go get it, and then you throw it again, and that's fun? Like, how is this fun? How is this fun? And I never stopped to think about all my training that way. That's, that we did over and over and over and over and over again. I'm sure it's like any profession that requires that amount of skill. It just is repetition of practice and getting better and just feeling like it is just so innate when it actually is about to happen.
Yeah. That's so funny that he said that, because there was a part in your book where you said you were practicing the discus, you threw 5 of them, and then you went and got, I was like, only 5? Then you have to go back and get them again? I was thinking the exact same thing.
That's exactly what he's like. Why do you not just have like 100 beside you?
Exactly.
But then your arm would fall off. It's like a pitcher. You need breaks, right? So
fair enough. By the way, speaking of your husband, I was reading, I heard that he clocked, his slap shot was clocked at like 80 miles an hour or something.
Yeah, it is
crazy
so hard. Yeah.
With one hand.
If you ever get a chance to watch sledge hockey, it is not only is it an amazing sport in and of itself, but he has developed this unique ability to basically take a slap shot. You're kind of a little bit technical. So most people, when they shoot, have 2 hands on their stick, and that creates the torque.
Yeah.
And obviously he only has 1 hand on a stick. So most people will just kind of sweep it, and you get a pretty hard slap shot or wrist shot with your, 1 hand, but it is a wrist shot. What he does is if the puck is on the ice, he slams the picks, which are like figure skating picks, into the side of his leg, which is a shin pad. So it's a plastic. Okay. So it's not actually literally.
Oh my God, that would hurt. Okay.
Doesn't have gashes, but he sticks that into the side of his leg, if you can imagine, near your shin bone, essentially, and then he uses the torque down on his stick to create torque on his stick to then have this whip action at the end. Now that happens within a split second. Nobody would even, if you watched it, you'd never know. But you should Google Billy Bridges and watch him take a slap shot, because it is just so quick. But he developed this at a young age, and hence shoots so much harder than everybody else in the entire world.
Yeah. Wow. And by the way, I if I'm not mistaken, you yourself had a very hard slap shot, one of the hardest on the team as well, which is pretty cool as a goalie.
Yeah, that's another thing I loved doing as a kid. I just loved shooting pucks. I loved shooting, and I set up this whole shooting station at my house. And so it served me well as a goalie coach, because that's what we're doing all the time, is shooting. Right. Now, I play in a women's rec league, and I play as a forward, and ask me to skate and shoot, and it's like this whole other thing. But stationary, I got some power. Awesome. But yeah, the game is too fast for me to skate down the wing and take a snipe top shelf.
So even at the elite level of goaltending, you start to then appreciate what the forwards and the defensemen have to do at their elite level, and how much harder that is. Well, in their own way, how much harder that is.
I think it really helped me knowing how to shoot, for knowing the tells that a player would have coming down towards me, and the direction of the face of their blade and the way that they're leaning into it. It allowed me to know what was going to happen, because I could do that myself. Right.
So I love to, when I chat with people like yourself in these different realms, to try to draw some parallels. Obviously, optometry and goaltending are not exactly the same thing, but there's always crossover and parallels between what you have to do. And a lot of it comes to mindset. And you've already touched on, the fact that you enjoy doing these little things that a lot of other people would get bored of, or you're super competitive, and that's from a young age. But there's a point in the book where you're talking in really great detail about a goal that the U.S. player scored on you, where you stacked the pads one way and then you reached over the other way and you just missed it, and you're replaying that in your mind. I assume this is before replay on the screen. So you had to replay the goal in your mind, and you're just kind of talking to yourself about what you did right, what you did wrong. Could you have saved that really if you had done something differently? And that type of self-awareness is really incredible, I think. First of all, how important is that as a goalie? And second of all, has that served you differently now in your professional career after hockey?
Yeah, interesting question. I think that optometry and the practice of medicine does really relate really well to sport. I think sport gives you so many lessons that allows you to be successful. And one of my teammates, Haley Wickenheiser, is doing a residency right now, which is really exciting. And just the focus of being in the moment, I think, is really key. And the ability to be present in every situation. I know that, often seeing it from the outside and knowing what my dad and my brother and my sister-in-law go through, you have bad days at home. You have, your kids are driving you bonkers, or somebody in the waiting room is, tearing pages out of your magazine, like for the 15th time, like things like that, that could really set you back. And on some days they do. And, I think that the ability to be present with that patient, with that next person, is so key, because that's their one moment. And I think that's the thing that hockey has really taught me is, as soon as my focus shifts somewhere else, a puck goes in. So realizing that moment is so key and so precious. So it has helped me with developing hockey players and at my hockey school, and meeting people too for the first time that, I might never have this chance again to meet that person. And this is their one moment with that Olympic gold medalist. And so realizing that this is a big deal for them, and that it doesn't matter what's going on in the rest of the world, is being present and focused at that moment. You talk about me reliving and replaying every goal and every moment. I think that I certainly did that, and I journaled a lot. So I'd write down basically how every goal went in that I've ever let in. So that helped with being able to write the book too, and having the feelings of whether it was a good goal or a bad goal, because I would document that. And I think that parallels really well to the medical profession too, is taking good notes, which is not always easy to do. My dad's writing is atrocious.
That's funny. That's something my staff and colleagues would tell me. I'm terrible at keeping good notes. I got to keep my charts up to date a little better.
People that are in the moment and are really present. I think it is hard. It's hard to remember, then to go back and do that. But I think that's one of the things that is perhaps the hardest thing within your profession. But realizing just how important that it could be 2 or 3 years down the road when diagnosing something for a particular patient, or, having those really good notes, I think is so key. Now that it's all online, it makes it a little bit easier to ensure that other people can also read your notes. It's funny, when the system was changing in my brother's practice, and so they had to go from my dad's notes to basically online computer things, and trying to figure out what which optometrist said what, or what is going on here. That was certainly some of the talk around the dinner table, like, what do you mean here? What we're trying to recall that situation. So certainly the ability to be present in a situation, document it, and then leave it too. I think as a goaltender, people always ask me, what makes a really great goaltender? And there's so many different skill attributes, and you can read it in the book that, I was a power athlete, and some of my goaltending cohorts were amazing cardio athletes, which I was not. It brings in all different types of people. Some goalies are super outgoing, some are very shy and reserved. I think it lends itself to being any type of person. But the one skill that I see paramount for all goaltenders is the ability to move on, is to, you think about the goal, you give it a moment, and then as soon as the puck drops, you're focused on the next puck and not replaying that over and over. And I think, in the medical world, that is so key. And in talking to Haley about what she's going through, I mean, the things that you have to deal with on a daily basis at times are, not pleasant, or really difficult. You have to deliver difficult, tough news to people. And then you have somebody else coming in, 2 minutes later that has a whole new set of issues, and you need to be present for that person. So, it's being there and really feeling it and being there for that person, but then parking it and moving on. And that's not an easy skill by any means. There's sometimes that goals would go in and you get derailed pretty quickly. But you have to learn how to park that and kind of move forward. And I think the reason that I was able to do that really helped with my journaling. Like, once I got it out, and then I knew in my head I could, talk about it to myself later, that helped. And goalies have different ways of doing this. Sometimes you'll see a goalie in the NHL who will spray water into their mouths and spit it up in the air. And that's their way of like releasing it.
I got you.
Everybody sort of has their own thing, but you have to find something that works for you. And it might take a little bit of time to figure out, what it is. And it might change depending on what you have to deal with. But finding something that works so that you can move on with your day and move on to your family too, and be there for them, and come home and be the dad that they expect you to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there, on that kind of note of like, moving on from it, you had a quote about goaltending is not about what happened, but focusing on the upcoming. And it sounded very like, I was going to ask you, do you read any like Stoic philosophy? I read a lot of like Stoic philosophers and stuff like that. And it sounded very much.
But I'm a big listener of Tim Ferriss. Do you listen to Tim Ferriss?
Yeah. Yeah,
so absolutely. I love Tim Ferriss, and all he talks about is stoicism. And every time I'm like, oh, I think I would love that. I think, I've not read any of it. And I think it just maybe is the mindset. I never knew how to, the words for it prior, but I'm sure that once I get into it, they're nonstop. It's probably very similar.
Your book is littered with like different phrases that would sound like they came from a Stoic philosopher, actually. So I was curious. I'm like,
maybe it's a good thing that I hadn't read any of that prior. I would have had to like document where it all came from.
Well, if you're looking for a good place to start, Marcus Aurelius' Reflections, I think it's called, which was basically his.
Tim Ferriss loves. Yeah,
great book. And then in general, Ryan Holiday is a fantastic author. He kind of like digests a lot of Stoicism and then puts it out in a very like easy way to read it. So another sort of a philosophical type of question here, or topic. The part of your book where there was a part where you officially kind of had to accept, you were told that I'm sorry, I think it was 2002 Olympics when you were told you're not starting the final, and you kind of, or maybe it was earlier than that, I don't remember now, but you were told you had to be the backup for that period of time, and it was a obviously very difficult thing for you to take, and you had to make a choice. Like, I'm going to make a big fuss about this, or I'm going to accept my role. And of course, that's part of the title of the book, the role you played. And Robin Sharma is a person that I read and listen to a lot, and that's one of the things that he talks about, is like being a leader without a title. And so that's essentially what you decided to do. Is, well, you had a title still, but you decided to still be a leader and be the best teammate you could possibly be. What happens in your mind at that point that makes you go that way versus, like, forget this, I'm out of here, you guys suck?
Yeah, basically. And there's plenty of times I felt that, for sure. And I would like to say that it's, I had this inner strength that allowed me to think that way. But, I didn't. I came into those situations very competitive, having experienced success, having been, a leader because I was the goalie, playing and winning championships. So to then be on the other side was really hard. I mean, all of a sudden, and maybe you're referring to the Salt Lake City Olympics, the night before the finals, when the coaches told us who was playing. Mm-hmm. And right up until that moment, I really felt like it was going to be me. And I don't think you become an elite athlete or really elite in your profession at all unless you feel like you can do it. You feel like you are deserving of it. You have to have that mindset in order to get to those levels. So I think that, when it happened, I was mad, I was sad, I was angry, I was, everything you could possibly imagine in that moment. And it was, a dream taken away from me. And I walked into the athletes village. I had tears pouring down my eyes. we didn't have cell phones that we could sort of connect with people. And so I didn't really know what to do. I mean, the people around me were about to play a gold medal game, and I didn't want to derail them, but, I wanted to complain. I wanted to bitch. I wanted to, I wanted to play. And that just was obviously, there's a whole chapter devoted to this, but really tough moments. And what I try to go through in the book is how I was able to come to terms with it. And a lot of it goes back to appreciating the positions I was put in on other teams. And so there's one particular story of a volleyball story. We won a provincial championship. And it was, 4 years with the same girls and super exciting. But two of my classmates and two of my friends sat on the bench in the final game. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about their position. They cheered the whole time and they were just as excited when we won. And I was the starting power hitter and captain of the team. But I didn't have this wherewithal to think about what everybody else was going through. I think I had these blinders as an athlete that, athletics makes us so selfish because it's all about you becoming better. You put so much time and effort into your own development. You often don't look around you. And so it wasn't really until those moments that I was put into that position that I realized how many other people were probably in this situation and had been in this situation and had gone through this. And, bigger than just hockey, but really in all of our lives, we're put into situations that we don't necessarily want to be in. But that you're right, you have two decisions. One is you can kick up a stink and, bring everybody down around you.
Yeah.
Or you can put those emotions aside and those feelings aside and be there for your teammates. And it wasn't easy by any means. There's obviously moments where, I would have to go off and be on my own because it was hard. Like it was just a constant reminder that you're not playing. But these were also my friends and I wanted them to have success. And I think the team that we had created meant that everybody wanted to be playing. And, everybody wanted to be competing, but for myself not being able to do that, I still wanted them to have their gold medal dreams come true. And I didn't, I wanted the team to not possibly go on without me. It does. It still moves on. And I think for a lot of us in our own lives, we have those moments where you just want the situation to not be able to happen without you. But it does. And so you can choose to make a difference or you can choose to step away. And certainly the next Olympics, when I was told I was the third goalie, I almost did step away because I felt like I couldn't hide those emotions for long enough. But it really was in finding joy through other successes that allowed me to find joy myself, to share in their victories, share in their big moments. And so when it came to cheering, while I never expected to be a cheerleader, this was the role that was asked of me. And so I did live vicariously through my teammates' big moments, because I'd been with them for so long and they were such good friends and teammates, I knew what they needed to be at their best. And so I tried to do that. And it's not to say I did it perfectly, but I did the best I could in that situation. And that's what I counsel to people going through tough times is that nobody wants to be put in those situations. But it does matter how you react. And it matters not only to yourself, but it matters to the people around you. And if we are going to be successful as individuals or as teams or as communities, it really takes every single person playing their role to the best of their ability. And the roles are going to change. It's not always the same, but it certainly taught me a lot about motherhood where there aren't rewards and accolades. Nobody gives you medals or ribbons. And it really is all about somebody else. And so that ability to give without getting anything in return, I think is a unique skill that I have learned because of the situations I've been put in, but realizing that that's bigger than sport. Everybody gets put in these situations. And that perspective really meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Moms are the ultimate MVPs, hey? And I'm not saying that lightly, having two little kids, but definitely you were the ultimate teammate in that position. That's really amazing. Do you have a medal with you?
I do. Yes.
Can we see it?
So,
can we see it?
So it doesn't come in a Crown Royal bag, but
that would be amazing. All right.
So this is the best thing that I found to kind of carry it around with. But
yeah, it's nice and velvety. Yeah, sure.
It is. Yeah.
If you're not watching, if you're listening, then please go to YouTube and pull this video up so you can see.
So this is a medal from Salt Lake. So I'm going to put it up close to the screen so you can see it.
So they actually made it look, it's not like a beautifully, perfectly round. Does that bother you as an engineer or is that okay for you?
So until I found out the reason. So the every Olympics gets to design their own medal. And this one, because we played in Utah where there's a lot of rock face, is supposed to be like a pebble. Oh, so every design of the outside is different and then it's stamped. And then right on the medal, it said, I don't know if you can see that, it says light the fire within.
Oh, I see that there.
That was the mantra of those Olympics. And then this is the back. So it's probably in reverse on yours, but there's little hockey players.
Oh no, it's correct. We can see it. Yeah, I guess it flips it around. Yeah, beautiful. Very nice.
So you can see there's a little bit of a dent right there. I dropped it on a kid in Newfoundland dropped it on a linoleum floor. So there's some dents out of it, and it certainly has been felt a lot, touched a lot of hands.
Yeah.
And the ribbon is a little worse for wear, but it's certainly, what I love about it is that it is something that lights people's faces up, and that
Yeah.
is it evokes so much imagination when people are holding it, and that's
Yeah.
really just really fun to see and to be able to pass around.
That's amazing. Yeah, the Olympics have a certain kind of magic to them. There's no doubt. Anybody who's
Mm-hmm.
into them, it's a very spot. I know you and Luke were very much into the Olympics, and I've very much been that way since I was a kid too. Something very special about them. So, Sami, I like to wrap up every interview with two specific questions that I ask every guest, and one of them actually we've kind of touched on in sort of a different form, but that's the first one I'm going to ask you. Actually, the first one I'll ask you, I'll reverse the order here. If we were to step back in a time machine and go back to a time when you were struggling, and I know there's a lot of points in the book where you talk about these types of things, but a specific point that you can think of, what advice would you give to yourself at that moment? You can share that moment if you'd like, but what advice would you give yourself at that time?
I think the best advice was given to me when I got home from the Salt Lake City Olympics, and at the time it was a friend of mine who happened to be an agent, and she said to me, that this is going to make a great story. And I think everything that I went through, had I gone on to, maybe be the starting goalie in certain time frames, or been successful and achieved what, I wanted to achieve, I might not have gone into the career I did, because as a professional speaker, I feel like I get so much value in hearing other stories, and being able to share my story from the platform is a unique story, not about rah, everybody can do it, do your best. It's more real, and it's more raw, and it's trying to evoke the emotion within the audience member or even the reader, to allow themselves to see themselves in those moments and see their own situations in that moment, and having that empathy. So I think the advice that I would say is that this is all going to make a really great story someday. And that's not easy to see in the perspective, but all of these moments that we experience as humans matter. They make us who we are. And, would I change anything if I was to go back? Well, sure, I would, I'd want to play in the big games, or I'd want to achieve this or that, but you can't change it. And so it doesn't matter if you want to or not, you can't change it. And so what can you do today to make it better? What can you do to, harness what you have and the skills that you've gained over all of those lessons that you've learned, and how can you use that for positive change in the future? So, I guess that would be, to not dwell on it too much, because it's all going to matter someday when you write it down in the book.
That's a good way to look at it. It'll be a good part of your story in the future, for sure. Mm-hmm. And the last question then is, with everything that you've achieved up until this point, how much of it would you say is due to luck, and how much is due to hard work?
I thought you were going to say how much is due to Luke.
We could throw that in there too as a third factor. We make it a triangle.
Good question. I mean, I think that we're all fortunate in different ways. So right off the get-go, being born in Canada is like, I've won the lottery right there. Being able to play a sport, even if I was never able to go to the Olympics, being able as a woman to be fit and active, to me, that is incredibly fortunate and incredibly lucky. So beyond that, anything that has happened to me in my life, I think, is small potatoes compared to what I could have been going through as a female in many parts of this world. So, I would say luck that I was born to incredible parents that wanted us to find our own passion. And beyond that, everything else is just kind of great on top of that.
Wow. I have to say, being as accomplished as you are, Sami, you are probably maybe not the only, but one of the very few who've put that much weight on luck. versus her. But I think it's amazing. I think it's very humble. That's a level of humility that not everybody has, and maybe that only comes from being through everything that you've been through. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really amazing to hear.
Oh, well, thank you.
So how can people find you? Where would you like people to go to learn more about you?
For sure. So they can, there's a optometry office on Portage Avenue in.
That's good. That's a good place to start.
There you go. It has an orange awning, although I think they just changed the color of the awning.
Oh.
So if you'd like to know more, book an appointment with Dr. Luke Small or Gina Small.
That's great.
No, but seriously, they on social media it's Sami Jo Small, and on all of the platforms. If you'd like to buy the book, it's actually available in bookstores right across this country. So it's at all the major retailers, but also all the small mom and pop stores too. So support your local.
Support local.
Book merchant. And if you can't, then you can buy it online as well, wherever you buy your books. And I really do hope that people not only read it, but see themselves in it. And I would love to hear those stories of, what impact it has in their lives and how the emotions are perhaps similar to what they're going through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were a lot of parts that I resonated with that I felt like reaching through the book sometimes. So I loved it. All right. So that's it, guys. If you're seeing on video here, it's the role I played, Canada's greatest, I'm going to get it right, Olympic hockey team. So make sure you check it out and give Sami a shout. Let her know what you thought. Any other final words, parting words, Sami?
Thank you, Harbier. This has been amazing. I have gone an entire 44 years without talking this much optometry outside of my family. So I appreciate it.
Good,
I'm going to get a whole language lesson, though, I'm sure, when I go home.
So actually, I should say, everybody message Sami and tell her what your SIL is. She'll love to know.
If you could, that's all we talk about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sami. I really appreciated this. It's so amazing to learn more about you. And thank you for contributing to the first anniversary episode of the
and happy anniversary. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.